let's switch it up a little bit because we're going to get into the fight between Yorgan Castro and Jarjis Danho. Now, the thing about this fight that I just, unfortunately, I'm trying to be so unbiased about, but one of my least favorite fights of all time is the Greg Hardy and Yorgan De Castro fight. We were in peak pandemic at that time, and I gotta say, I would have rather taken my chances like walking around in the street for a few minutes and then come back home for the next fight because, frankly, that one was one of the worst to watch. I think as a fighter, you have to tell yourself, because I'm probably one of the most lenient guys you'll ever meet on a fighter. I had no complaints about the Woodley-Stephen Thompson fight. That's just who I am. When two guys are willing to do this for a living, I could care less. I'm going to enjoy whatever you guys put together. But in this case, it was a simple situation of two guys who, you're UFC fighters. And I do believe that towards the end of the ring, both guys were exhausted. And I just feel like as this sport becomes more and more athletic, it's just not a good look. I think that a lack of striking from fear of, getting hit or just simple tactics of maybe trying to work in takedowns or anything like that, that makes sense to me. But landing like 2 leg kicks over the course of a round or something like that, these are things that just bother me because it's output. And to me, you're just not doing your job at that point, right? Damian Maia and Anderson Silva come to mind, and I think that's the one that kind of falls in the middle of the two for me between Stephen Thompson and Tyron Woodley and this fight that we're talking about, because there's a little bit of both, right? There's strategy in it, but there's also like, what the hell's going on? What's this man doing? I think he just knows he's going to get clipped if he goes the other way, so he's just going to keep circling. And again, what can you really argue against that? Is that strategy? To me, that's a yes. But this is not. This is two tired men doing their best to stay standing because they have to fight for longer than they'd like. And in this case, I'm really hoping that that's not the problem, because let's quickly touch on a guy like Jarjis Danho. The fights that we've seen him in, not the most, prevalent fighter. The guy's been around since 2016 in the UFC, and he's only fought twice, and the last fight was a draw against our boy Christian Colombo back in 2016. Now, the thing I like about that fight is the only reason it was a draw is because, again, remember I mentioned at the beginning of the show, illegal knee. This guy took an illegal knee, and he ended up actually getting a point taken. Well, Colombo got a point taken away, and that fight ended up being a draw. So Jarjis would have actually been a winless UFC fighter and now getting into the octagon for the first time in 5 years against a guy like Yorgan De Castro, who still is the same man that just walk-off home run Justin Tafa. Now, this is my personal argument. I think Tafa became a much better fighter after that versus Yorgan De Castro, using that as a stepping stone. You know what I mean? I feel like the Tafa we saw against Carlos Felipe is the real deal. Because when you go look at the Carlos Felipe and Yorgan De Castro fight, Carlos Felipe kind of reminded him what he needs to do for the course of 3 rounds. So that's where, for me, in this fight, I'm just hoping to see two guys really give it their all. That's all I can really hope for, because I think Yorgan De Castro is a great striker. I think that he's got power in his hands, and he's got great accuracy. Now, the problem for me is in both of these guys is when they start to fade, it's tough to watch. And the thing is, they're both in that potential range to fade. I think the size difference for Jarjis is pretty good. I think that when you look at Yorgan De Castro, he's just a smaller heavyweight that likes to throw overhands, or he likes to just come at your head. And that's where, for me, if I had to think of a fight where you're going to see these guys stand, you got Jarjis at his 100% takedown defense, and our boy, Yorgan De Castro at 75% takedown defense. These guys don't want to go to the ground. They want to throw. But if you guys want to throw, please do us all a favor and actually throw. Because I'm not seeing very technical sides to the lack of activity there. Just a couple of guys who are professional fighters that are just too tired to fight the entire length of the fight. And I have to say, when it's coming from not as much activity, when the lower guys are throwing, let's go look at the total strikes per round in some of these fights where guys are actually getting tired. That's where, for me, the UFC and MMA in general is just taking such an athletic turn that fights like that are becoming more and more and more, or I say less and less and less and less attractive to me. And so that's where, if I had to take a break, it's usually around those fights, because I've seen it all. I've seen so many to the point where I just can't allow myself to sit through an entire fight like that, because I think that's where, as a fan, as a person who wants to be a part of this community and industry, that's the one where I myself have to draw the line. So when we're talking about the big power shots, we said it. Yorgan De Castro's coming in big-handed. Jarjis is just not that experienced of a fighter. And the one thing I didn't like about him is a lot of looping shots, especially as he gets tired. He's just trying to get in there and do his business. And so with both guys that kind of do that towards the end of the fight, you're kind of hoping that it stays within the first 2 rounds. But in any case, I think both guys have a great shot at winning here. The size difference is definitely going to benefit Jarjis. But when you're looking at the odds, Yorgan De Castro's coming in at one of the biggest favorites on this card. Outside of Marvin Vettori, which we'll get into a little later, he is the biggest favorite on the card. So take that with a grain of salt. You heard it here first. If some kind of surprise happens, you heard it here. But let's hope that it's a quick, fun, early fight. And if not, let's see some beautiful athletes go for 3 rounds and give us a beautiful, beautiful showing.